So I'm Jeremiah Owyang. I've been in Silicon Valley for 20 years. I am definitely over 30, but entrepreneurism is in all of us here in Silicon Valley and around the globe. It's not limited to age, but when we see that there's youth, young folks that are going out to risk these things, and society may tell them, go get a permanent job, get a full-time job, or their parents, I'm curious to see how your parents have reacted to these lifestyle changes and lifestyle choices. Entrepreneurism is for the bold, right? You're taking great risks. So let's just start with some introductions down the line. And I don't want to hear about your companies. There will be a time and place for that. I actually want to hear about you. So Andrew, if you could just tell me about you, what makes you tick, and who are you, man?
So I'm Andrew Scheuermann, the CEO and co-founder of Arch Systems, which I'll tell you about later. I did a PhD here at Stanford in material science, worked on all kinds of energy technologies. So one of the things that made me tick is a passion for climate change and sustainability. So when I was in high school, I picked that problem, maybe out of the air, maybe because it was popular at first, but it became my passion. And what's behind it is this idea of this tragedy of the commons, that we've gotten really good at as a capitalist society at driving an individual to do things in their own self-interest, and that kind of working out, but it has lots of downsides that we haven't figured out how to do that more collective part really well. And climate change is a classic example of that. Everybody's doing their own businesses, but they're throwing things into the sky, which is getting polluted. So I started working on the ocean and et cetera, right? And we see that in the manufacturing place where we work too, the amount of waste to make one product. So I worked on fuel cells initially. I worked on solar panels, nuclear technology for a bit, and batteries, and then got into this world of the Internet of Things, which is like the data layer around that, which is really exciting. So data makes me tick, data-driven decisions, and anything we can do to make the world more sustainable. And it's a little philosophical, but when I look at the work I've done, if I think that I have overcome a tragedy of the commons, kind of brought people together, that is really what makes me happy. So, and hopefully it doesn't sound
I love that passion, that's great. No, it's not cliche. I mean, we need inspiration. There's a lot of problems in the world that need to be solved. But what's really interesting to me is that you have spent time in Africa doing some of this work, right? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the beginnings of Arch System, especially with my co-founder Tim, was in Panama and then Africa. Our company began trying to solve this problem of clean water access. It's a really important problem in philanthropy. And there's a lot of research that's shown that if poor communities have access to clean drinking water, they will just be uplifted. Now, the problem was there was already a lot of money going into providing that clean water, but a lot of those wells were just broken. The machines were down. And so the idea was, if we could put a sensor on top of those machines, imagine suddenly you've got a map of this region, this country. We happen to be in Tanzania to begin with. Right. And here's every well. It's up or it's down. How much water are people getting? And now you could actually build a sustainable management system on top of that. But I don't know how much you want me to go into it. It's kind of the story of Arch here. But that technology,
we'll come back to that, yeah.
That technology didn't truly exist. And that's what got us going on this journey.
Thank you, Andrew. We are delighted to have Roxanne join us, and we had another panelist listed she is not feeling well, so she's not able to attend, but I'm delighted to meet Roxanne. Roxanne just left a very small company down in Cupertino, and now she's starting a new organization, but tell us about yourself. You are not American, but we're delighted to have you. What brings you here to us?
Born in China, grew up in Canada, graduated computer engineering from University of Waterloo. And where I worked on Siri as a program manager. And it felt very not close to my heart because when my grandma was diagnosed with cancer, it was very apparent that this is where I should dedicate 60 to 70 hours of my week trying to accelerate and help that industry, because there are many professionals, medical professionals, who spend years gaining a lot of knowledge and researching in cancer, but really 1 hour of their input is because of the poor process. It's not being translated into 5 hours worth of profit. And to answer the question of my myself, I mean, that's basically why I left Apple to create, to build something, yeah, to accelerate cancer research.
Okay, Riley, tell us about yourself. So where are you from originally?
So I grew up in Northern Virginia.
DC, right? Or,
Yes, DC area.
Yeah. Tell us about you.
So I echo Roxanne's sentiment. I realized very early on that I had anywhere from 60 to 70 years to be alive, and I wanted to dedicate everything I had to healthcare. And the reason for that is my younger sister was born with a heart condition called tetralogy of Fallot, when your bottom ventricles are fused together. And her surgeons, her primary care physicians, the medical device companies that created the implant, all the way through the entire community that supported her, showed me that healthcare can save people's lives. And my sister is alive and lives a pretty normal life.
So you have an optimistic view of
I have an
the healthcare
optimistic
system.
view, but I see that by dedicating your life to making a difference, I saw it happen to my younger sister. She would not have been alive without what these companies and people had done and the risk they took through the clinical trials to help her heart function. And I think living that, growing up in a translational research home, where I saw the clinical trials, I saw them play out, was fully convinced I wanted to dedicate my life to healthcare. And in high school, I spent all my time going to research labs at Georgetown and at Children's National to start, I think, understanding how we can use research to impact people within cardiovascular disease, oncology, and other areas.
Right.
And from personal experiences, gravitated to oncology, and have been very focused on early detection of cancer.
Thank you. Great. So finally, down to you. The most interesting background, you came from St. Petersburg in Russia.
Yeah.
And what brings you here to Silicon Valley?
Yeah, my name is Marina. I'm from St. Petersburg, Russia. I grew up there and I moved to Silicon Valley in 2015 because we got accepted to 500 startups, the accelerator program.
Mm-hmm.
I have been a language fan since I was born. My granddad would tell me fairy tales, how people who knew English well would succeed in their lives. So I was really passionate about languages. But when I turned 14 and my parents sent me to the UK, actually won a scholarship to go to the UK to study with British kids, I came to that school and I realized I don't understand what people are talking about. And I was this straight A student at school, and I realized the language that we learn at home is completely different from the actual language. And this is how I became this person who promotes study abroad, and this is what our company does. And then at the age of 23, I thought I would love to build an international company, and I wanted to get an MBA from an American university. And I checked out the tuition fees, and they were around like $100,000 a year. I was like, this is impossible.
For Stanford?
Yeah, for Stanford, for example. And I started researching different scholarships, and it turned out there are actually loads of them. And I was able to get a full ride scholarship to do my MBA in Johns Hopkins University and University of Florida. And I also realized that not a lot of people recognize that there is a huge opportunity to get your studies funded. And this is how I started my YouTube channel. I actually have 3 now with over 2 million people following me, where I teach people languages, teach people how to get admissions with a full ride scholarship and how to achieve their dreams.
So who's your audience of your YouTube channel?
So because I have 3 channels, one is called Silicon Valley Girl. It's mostly people who pursue their dreams in business and want to build a company.
Okay.
The second, the largest channel is Lingua Marina with over 1 million followers, where I teach people English. So I would say they are students
Got it.
who want to speak real language.
Got it. How many languages do you speak?
I speak 4. I speak Russian, English, German, and a little Italian.
Good. All right. So just curious. I'm curious about the ages of the panels. Am I allowed to ask that, or is that like on PC? If you'd like to disclose your age, I would love to hear. Obviously, you're under 30, so.
Yeah, I'm 28.
25.
I'm 26.
I just turned 30, so I'm up
Get
here
out.
on the band.
Great. It's really inspiring. Amazing to hear. So I asked the panel to take this. I'm just curious. How many are familiar with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals? There's 17 of them. Okay, about a third of the audience. There's 17 of them. Actually, technically there's 16. The 17 one says like partner, so it's not really a goal. But they align around really important issues, and I think it's a really great framework and anchor. And I talk about them even with my 6-year-old daughter. Like, look, honey, these are the problems in the world. Maybe I'm overloading her already. That's a Silicon Valley dad issue, right? But I think it's important that they understand here's some of the big challenges. And some of the challenges that are listed out are fighting poverty or healthcare for all. Also, well, what are some of the other ones? Obviously, clean oceans, clean air. There's quite a few of them. None of them are surprising per se, but they're well articulated with clear icons, and there's some interesting graphics. So I would like the panel to talk about what are the major problems that you see in our world that is inspiring you to go out and make changes. And this is an open, anybody can jump on this one.
Oh man, I think
Yeah.
I think the best, so cancer hits us all very evenly. But it's shown that depending on the center that you actually go get your treatment, your chances of survival is highly dependent on that. And for people who don't have the money to go and travel, who don't have the money to find the time to get on the calendar of the top 5% of oncologists. You just don't have the same chances of survival, and that's not fair.
Post-diagnosis or pre-diagnosis?
Post.
Okay.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So access to quality healthcare is not accessible to all, is what I'm hearing. Okay. Great. Marina, I'm curious. What are the big problems that you see in the world?
Yeah, I would say access to education. Growing up in Russia, again, I would hear stories about like Stanford and Harvard, and I thought people who study in those universities probably come from Mars because it seemed so far away and so inaccessible. And with our community now, with my channels, what I'm doing is I'm trying to show people that if you're talented, if you're hardworking, you can actually get there, and that people who are here are just passionate about what they do. And we're doing a lot of like free lectures for students from all over the world to show them this education is actually real and you can get it. I think this is a huge problem. People just don't realize that they can do it. They can travel and get this amazing education.
You almost found like a hack in a way though, right? Like how to get scholarships that are not well known, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, what are some other challenges? I mean, let's back up on that. So resources and funding for education is part of that, not just the access to it, right? Not that it's physically far away.
Yeah, and also bringing education online, because when you have access to like an online class and you're able to learn from the top professional, because like 20 years ago, you would need to travel to listen the lecture. Now it's all online, and I love what Coursera does, for example, publishing all of the top universities' lectures online, so you can learn from the best.
Great. Riley, Andrew.
I think we focus in healthcare a lot on whether or not a device or a drug works, instead of asking, does it improve outcomes for people, health economic benefit? And I think Europe is making incredible strides towards changing policy, which would require anything to be approved to demonstrate some actionability and outcome data associated. And I think if the US is going to sustain our ability to finance our healthcare ecosystem, we should really lean on and work with some of these other countries to drive towards outcomes to determine whether or not something gets approved. It's not good enough just to say that this drug does X, Y. It should actually demonstrate utility for people.
Any comment around Asia, Africa, Latin America, and their healthcare systems?
Most regulatory agencies don't publish the work that they're doing in terms of what they're going to change in the future. I think Europe is the first, and there's many, but some of the countries in Europe have stepped forward to show how they're going to be really changing the process to drive towards outcome. So I have not heard anything from FDA and nothing from CFDA in China or some of the other countries. So
Okay.
I think it's exciting that we have a set of countries that are really pushing forward for value-based pricing and outcomes requirements for regulatory approval. But I think the other countries should also step forward.
Great.
For us, so Arch is organized as a hybrid social enterprise, which we can go and talk to later. We talk about a pure for-profit approach, which is attacking this issue of the fourth industrial revolution. I'll talk a little more about that, and there's a lot of things happening there. And then on our impact side, one of the sustainable development goals around clean and reliable water access for all, which is a big part of alleviating global poverty. On the Industry 4.0 revolution, there's this massive thing happening in the way that we do work, which is going to have a massive impact on everyone's life. And our company is addressing a key part of what I think is going to make that possible. And so there's issues around achieving a massive gains in efficiency and waste reduction that are possible because of it. And then, of course, managing it very well. There's a lot of concern about what's going to happen with jobs and how that's going to change the nature of the economy. So being involved in those transitions and trying to be a force for good that helps facilitate that in a way.
Okay, great. When I looked at the UN Sustainable Development Goals, most of them had themes around income inequality and also combating climate change. And it sounds like most of your startups are aligned or themed in many ways around those as well. So I think it's important we look at those bigger trends. In particular, Marina, what you're looking at. Yesterday, Oxfam published a finding. I don't know if you guys read this. It was all over my social feeds that the 26 wealthiest people in the world have as much wealth ownership as the bottom 50% of the world. So that is extreme. That's an incredible curve when you think about the wealth distribution curve. And that sets off a number of impacts that include what happens in capitalism, which, to your point, is a model that has got us to great innovations, but there are things that are not working in the commons. Yeah. So can you define, Andrew, a little bit more about the fourth industrial revolution? And then I want to hear about everybody's company.
Sure. So the first industrial revolution was the steam engine. Each of these have fundamentally changed the way that we do work, and they have broad ramifications for every part of society. Right? The steam engine just changed the way that mechanical work was done. The second was electricity. The third was the dawn of the computers. And then the fourth is being defined, but it's about the networking of computers together to speak this language of data. Certainly AI fits into the category, but that's something that people are still trying to understand. So it's this revolution that makes not just things driven by computers, but self-learning. So that brings up the fear of the changing of jobs, but it also has the potential to do things just smarter than ever before. Just one statistic that I like to say is like if everybody looks down at the shoes that you're wearing, what if I told you that to get that shoe on your feet, twice as much material might have been required to do it, and it went straight into the trash? And that you buying the shoes that you like is also participating in this waste, like without having any choice otherwise, right? So the fourth industrial revolution can potentially change the way that things like this are built and make them dramatically more efficient. And if we can curb the negative effects of it, it could make society much better off.
So an intelligent society through data, machine learning,
exactly,
IoT, 5G, all these technologies are empowering for that.
Coming all around. But of it is the transition from a process that has just one loop, you hit go and nothing changes, to one that actually kind of reprograms itself based on data, which is handing over a little bit of our control to the machine to learn, right? Not a sentient AI, but one that is allowed to evolve to the task.
So we'll come back to that with everybody around data and security and ownership. This is all related to everything you guys are doing. Who owns some of this healthcare data? You come from Apple. This is the top thing that Apple's pushing on. And then, of course, is the data when we're our educational information. So let's hear about folks' companies. And Roxanne, you are so curious. Who here is an entrepreneur? Great. About a quarter of the hands. Who is not an entrepreneur but is interested in this and might want to be one in the future? Okay. Even more hands. So Roxanne, you are obviously have a wonderful pedigree at Apple, and now you're in an early stage situation with trying to start a new company, which is great because we get to hear about that. And I want to hear about where you are in your path. And when I started my first company, it was pretty fucking stressful. And I do remember screaming into my towel and working all weekends, and I had 10 weeks to launch, and I did launch with 24 clients on a conference at a stage. It was great, but it was very stressful. I put my family on the line, I put my marriage on the line, I put my health on the line. It was a lot. So tell us about like this story for you. What are you trying to do with your company?
Yeah, I really appreciate this question because it's very fresh to me right now.
Yeah.
I think leaving that structure and leaving that system is tremendous amount of freedom, which is a blessing and very scary at the same time. You look at your calendar on the next day and you pile it up with the right conversations that you want to be having and to push for progress. And a lot of it has been tapping into your own personal network and getting introductions. And especially in healthcare, that could be anyone in pharmaceutical companies, regulatory, like FDA. You want to talk to definitely physicians, a lot of patients.
So you're doing market validation right now, that sounds like?
Yeah, so I recently reconnected with an oncologist I shadowed at MD Anderson and talked to her researchers and planning a road trip over to drive to Houston and get a more nationwide or a Southwest states understanding of what cancer care is like today. And advice that Riley gave when we were in line is, without fully understanding your problem, how could you even come up with a solution that you think is actually going to work without fully understanding the problem? And personally, until I talked to 200, 300 patients, and we're getting there, and talk to as many researchers that are willing to talk to us to completely understand the problem space.
And you're pre-funding, right?
Pre-funding, yeah.
So in the meantime, your bank account's getting smaller, paying Silicon Valley rent, right?
Exactly, which I'm really appreciative of my parents as well. And Asian parents have this tendency to, the parents compare their kids and how are they going to explain, oh, my child is not making money. She's following her passion and just trying to make the world a better place.
Are your parents in Canada or
they're
Silicon
in Canada,
Valley? Okay.
Yeah, they're in Toronto. And they're highly supportive. And
For how long?
For how long, exactly. My mom actually put a deadline on it. She said by Halloween, you should probably figure something out. And I appreciate that she gave us a deadline, gave myself a deadline, but I will have something figured out way before then.
Thank you for sharing that. It's
Yeah.
deep. And wave to your mom. She's watching right now. I just got the message.
I think she's on a cruise, actually, with some of her friends.
Okay. I was just making that up. Marina, tell us about your company.
Yeah, my company is called linguatrip.com. It's a booking platform for language courses all over the world. So basically, if you're trying to learn a foreign language and you're unsuccessful with the apps and like tutors, etc., you cannot speak, and this is what I experienced. You go on LinguaTrip, you select a language that you want to learn, and the country where you want to do that. So if it's Spanish, it's probably be Spain. And you go to the country, stay with the locals, and go to a local language school.
So it's not e-learning.
No, it's not. It's
you
actually,
go there.
Yeah, we actually match them with language schools
like a marketplace.
all over the world. Yeah, it's like Expedia for those language travel trips.
You didn't say not an Airbnb?
You can call it Airbnb. We have the Airbnb part
okay.
as well because we match you with a local family who's going to be there for you and teach you language as well. And our students reach the next level within like 6 to 8 weeks, which is a pretty fast progress.
And so the student pays the host to stay?
Yeah, basically because we're a big platform now, we can discount. So students actually get cheaper rates than booking directly with schools. And we have over 35,000 paying clients.
So what are the most popular languages people want to learn right now?
90% of the world learns English because English is the language that helps you advance your career, start a business, start a career in an international company. So English is number one. And our top destinations would be the US, UK, Canada.
Okay, so they're coming.
Yeah, they're coming here. Yeah, and in regarding the way we started, so I started when I was 21 years old. I was still doing my bachelor's, and we didn't have money to rent an office. I just got some cash to buy a mobile phone, which was my office number. And when it rang during the lecture, I had to run out and pretend that I'm in the office, because the average trip cost is like $1,700. And I needed to sound really professional.
Fake it till you make it.
Yes.
We've all done that.
That's it, yeah. And then we rented a table in a big office space. And we could also rent like a shelf. And I ordered the shelf to be at the other end of the office so I could stand up when the clients come and pretend that this is the whole space that belongs to us. So I walk all the way through the office to get a brochure or something. Because it was so funny, like renting a table for like $100 and selling those strips. But this is, yeah, the way to make it in the business.
Yeah, it's true. So I'll share fake it till you make it. When I was selling to my corporate clients, when I launched my first company, I was using my home office. Here's a tip for you entrepreneurs. Put in *70 before you dial the client, otherwise your home phone number shows up on there and doesn't look like a real business. So it blocks out the number. So that's one hack that you should know. I now have an office phone, so I'm good on that. All right, Andrew, so how big is your company? You started obviously several years ago. How many employees? Like, can you share any of your gross turnovers, revenues, growth rates?
Yeah, we have more than 40 people who are full-time and 60 with contractors, 1.4 million revenue in 2018.
I'm sorry, say it again.
1.4 million in revenue in 2018, and the GMV, like the gross marketplace value, over $6 million.
Okay, of the buyers and sellers, the marketplace.
Yeah.
Great, how about growth?
Growing more than 2x every year. So we launched the platform in 2015 when we got accepted to 500. So before that, it was like an offline agency in St. Petersburg, Russia, when we were just trying out if the model works. So
Right.
we had like a brick and mortar office, signed all the contracts. I would call the schools myself. And then we realized there's no way to scale this. So we decided to build the online platform.
Where in the United States are students coming to stay? Curious, which states?
New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, like the big cities would be the top destinations.
Okay. I mean, it's interesting because there's different types of English in America, by the way, or different dialects
Yeah.
too. So
Yeah.
if somebody stays in one part of the country, they're going to come out sounding very different than,
Exactly.
slightly different than other places. So
Exactly,
it's
yeah.
very interesting. All right, Andrew, what's underneath your seat?
I always take one of our sensors with us.
So, let's hear
So I
about
can
it.
do some branding and marketing. I got our VP of marketing and biz dev Talis here too, so hopefully he's proud of that.
Okay, what is this?
This is a very, very simple sensor device. So, okay, I got to go back to the story. So specifically our co-founder Tim, before myself too, and then I joined him, was working on these early projects for water access. And as I said, a lot of the world, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Charity Water, they were starting to pour water into drilling wells, right? And the problem was 40% of all the wells in sub-Saharan Africa were broken a couple months later. And that wasn't helping anyone. And in some of these areas in Tanzania where we were focusing initially, 80% of them were broken. So you had this issue where this is an industrial system, right? This is like a utility, like the lights here, but nobody was managing it. And it was kind of a tragedy of the commons in the sense everybody was beginning with caring about their well. That's my well that I sponsored, that I backed. But there was no management structure in place. So my co-founder, Tim, initially had this idea that I'm going to build a sensor. This is, the peace dividends of the smartphone war. You've got all these cheap components.
So it's a water sensor, or is it a mechanical sensor for the
little
the pump?
low-power computer that was part of the key. Sometimes it had a pump on it, a motor, so he might want to tap the current voltage and see what the motor was doing. Other times, so this is like a plug here, other times he wanted to do what's called a non-invasive flow sensor. So he wanted to do like an ultrasound. He wanted to do a bunch of different things. And everyone was like, that's silly. Just pick one thing and do it well. But he's like, well, all those different wells in Africa have different mechanisms. Like they were built with different companies' parts. Like they didn't standardize. So I can't standardize my sensor. Everybody said, that's silly. That's not how you build a mass market product. But he was like, no, I'm going to do something different, right? So he started coming up with these ideas, so these little tiles that we call I/O tiles now.
I/O tiles, input-output tiles?
Input-output tiles, exactly. Internet of tiles, right? And if you pop open the box, he was like, I'm going to make this thing modular all the way to the bottom, right? Which is a way that high-end industrial technology, Siemens, GE, has done it. He's like, I'm going to do it with low-cost parts, so I can customize to that well, and still have 50 bucks of hardware. Completely modular, right? So he started getting close, but there was still this big gap between being able to really bring this thing to market and that problem he wanted to solve. It was still fundamentally a charity project. There wasn't a for-profit model there.
Okay.
And we started talking, and I was part of the early team that built the StartX accelerator. And I happened to work with 30 to 40 early IoT companies. And I'd seen some of the early ideas of trying to get into places like manufacturing. And I was like, there is a huge opportunity for what you're trying to do in manufacturing. Top manufacturers in the world, kind of like your different wells that use this standard and that standard. It's the same thing in the top factories. They don't look like that picture of Tesla of everything's already polished. No, they're using machines that get the job done, and they're trying to be low cost. Like our top customer spends $500 million a year on machines. They can't afford to increase that budget. So I said, there's this huge opportunity here if we could do this for manufacturers. And we said, okay, so that's when we sat down and we said, what if we try to do a hybrid social enterprise? Let's take this amazing technology that you've started building, and let's take this to factories where we can help drive this Industry 4.0 revolution. And let's create efficiencies and savings there. Let's do something amazing there. At the same time, it's very millennial, I know.
So you're looking through the supply chain is part of your secret strategy here. Okay.
Absolutely. And it very, very millennial, but we're like, we want to have it all, right? So we want to be able to be involved in that really important trend in a for-profit way that will drive our progress, but we want to try to open source a lot of the key building blocks so we can also sponsor these philanthropy projects in a fundamentally different way and change this typical order of an industrial technology gets built, 20 years later it gets to those poor areas. We want to bring it to both at the same time.
Okay.
That was our big idea, and today we have, hopefully in 3-6 months we'll be announcing a very big customer we partnered with recently, but we're doing a global rollout of factories around the world. We've got some major customers putting our sensors in, and we have 5 developing world projects that we work with right now. There's a video up on our social media about one that we did recently, and we're hoping to expand on both fronts and be scaling in the coming years.
Got it. So are you guys, you mentioned you're for-profit, but you're doing a social enterprise. So are you a B Corporation?
We are Delaware C Corp.
Okay.
We have the majority of the B Corp components written into our bylaws, so a balance between CEO pay, my pay, and the average person at the company, things about sustainability and waste. Possibly there could be an opportunity to change to B Corp. We leaned full in on being Delaware C Corp. We want to go raise money at good terms and do this thing, but build in the social enterprise part as well. So we're pioneering something a little new. It's custom to our company, and that was our attitude. Like we're going to figure something different out.
So how many employees, where are you guys based out of? Tell me about your growth rate. Sounds like you're on a healthy clip. Any revenues? Give me some numbers.
Yeah, we're quasi-stealth mode. We don't share all the numbers. We grew 4x last year, so we're definitely growing at a really good clip here.
Okay.
We are 18 right now. We're starting to pick up people fast, so we're post-Series A.
And you're based here in Silicon Valley?
Our headquarters is here in Silicon Valley. We're starting to build a more distributed team. So we've got someone in India. We've got a couple of people in France. Might have someone in South America soon. We're becoming a little more remote first and digitized in the way we do work. We're embracing that trend. And our customers are all over. We have deployments in 9 countries. And with our big manufacturing customer, they have factories in 30 countries. So that's another thing. We were kind of international from day one. And we have a concentration of people here. Myself, the co-founder, went to Stanford. Talis went to Stanford. So we have about a core here in the Valley. But we've got people increasingly from all over. And we hope that continues, because that's one of the most fun parts, too, is just being a citizen in the world and seeing this technology play out in many different spheres.
That's great. Riley, your company is doing very well, and you've raised, $78 million already, including from Andreessen, and who are some of the other VCs, investors?
Google Ventures, Polaris, Founders Fund, a couple others.
Okay, cool. Polaris, I have friends there, like Gary Swart. And you yourself are a Teal Fellow, so you have quite the impressive resume, and the company's already showing promise. Tell us about the company.
70% of cancers are detected in late stage, which is expensive. And as a family member, community member, I think all of us have seen what cancer can do. And I think it's scary to think, but if you do detect disease earlier, the survival rates can range from 100% to 70%, when in late stage disease, we're talking about 10%.
And what type of cancer are you focused on?
So we're building a platform that interrogates and understands how different biomarkers within blood can identify cancer at the earliest stages. So it's more of a hypothesis-free method. And we found that the immune system is quite active in early stage cancers. But to prove out this platform, we're primarily looking at colorectal cancer, where in the US alone, 70 million people do not get screened. People don't get the colonoscopy. And if with a blood-based method, we can help get more people to get screened onto colonoscopy.
Are we talking finger prick or what?
No, you need a
Blood draw?
standard blood draw,
Okay.
probably 2 to 3 tubes of blood as part of an annual physical. And our
At,
goal here
at a traditional lab.
at a phlebotomy clinic, that would be sent to a central lab, yes. I think what's really important here and why colorectal, when you look at all the different cancers you could pick, colorectal cancer, there's a clear next step. Get a colonoscopy. We can work closely with gastroenterologists. We fit right into the healthcare system. The FDA just approved recently a stool-based test for colorectal cancer screening. So we can fit right into care pathway. We can build these relationships with health systems, payers, and providers that really drive towards adoption of Freenome's first test. But it gives us a framework to then generalize into new indications over time by having a very focused use case in colorectal cancer where people just aren't getting screened today.
What percentage of Americans are having that type of cancer?
So today, in terms of percentage rates, the screening guidelines are 55 to 85. And I believe the incidence rate over lifetime for colorectal is roughly 1.5%.
Okay, cool. Tell me about the company. Where you guys are in South Sea in the biotech quadrant, right?
Yes. So we're in South San Francisco. We're 85 people. And our lab is based in South San Francisco as well. And I think that's the power of having the lab and the computational researchers, the engineers, and the medical affairs team all working closely together. Because bringing together disciplines that don't traditionally work together. And I think by having those groups co-located and working closely towards solving this problem, we're all here for the same reason, but we all bring a different lens to the technology that we're creating.
Got it. And how old is the company, and any numbers you can share, like on its performance?
4 years. And I would say the biggest drivers of our success are our paper, which we just put out in December, which demonstrates one of the first performance metrics from looking at circulating material for colorectal cancer detection, outperforming some of the existing non-invasive technology, which is really exciting. And I think what's cool about that paper is you'll see people from the medical affairs team all the way through regulatory, through molecular biology, through machine learning and engineering on the same paper. And I can't say how much work the team put in to put together a 40-page document on what our technology is. So I think publication is a big marker of 2018. We closed deals with about 9 different diagnostic and biopharma companies who, as we've built this platform to help discover signatures in colorectal cancer, they're paying us and using our core technology to solve other problems in Alzheimer's all the way through infectious disease. We fundamentally believe that there's enough problems in this world where earlier detection and better biomarkers can improve outcomes for people. And we are not shy about allowing people to get access to that technology and using those data to help answer other clinical questions.
Got it. Now, Riley, you have the gift that you looked very young. Now, have any VCs pushed back on you, or any of these companies you're trying to sell to, and do you have like a fake mustache you put on or anything? Like how, you're going against some of the most highly regulated old dude industries out there. Like how are you proving your worth? I mean, do you wear the hoodie to the pitch meetings? Like
no. I think this is really important. Healthcare, it's people's lives, and it should be taken seriously, but it doesn't mean that somebody who's never been in this space can't help contribute and bring a new perspective or bring people together who have never really worked together. If I walked into a room assuming what I knew, assuming I know how the FDA works, assuming I know how payers work, or even how a physician interfaces with patients, I would fail within 6 months. And you have to know your blind spots and hire people and join up with partners and team members who cover your blind spots, and really listening to people when they push back, building strong relationships with the core stakeholders that will allow us to launch a colorectal cancer test is first and foremost what we had to do. And I think demonstrating to investors that we were willing to maintain a level of humility and bring in those experts who were going to allow us to succeed, that we could build a track record as founders of making decisions in this field that were always for the betterment of patients and working within the healthcare system. And I think we had to build up that track record over about a year before we could convince anybody to give us capital. which included Andreessen Horowitz sending us blinded samples to validate some of the data that we had.
They really tested you with the blood samples.
Yes, and they should, because I feel there's a lot of noise in this space.
And there's been some BS companies that,
Yep.
in the healthcare space. All right, so millennials have a pretty shitty reputation. Do you think it's warranted? And this is to the whole panel. And what are you going to do about it? Andrew, you mentioned this a couple times.
It's obviously partially warranted, but no, it's not completely warranted. Like, millennials are full of optimism. They want to change the world. Like, they drink expensive lattes. I don't, but some do.
And avocado toast.
And avocado toast. I do like avocado toast. It's worth $18, whatever it is. What are we going to do about it? I guess I'll tell a little story. Like, when I grew up all over. My dad was in the Navy. I spent a lot of time in the South. And when I was in Florida, a lot of the other millennials around me, there's some that are very optimistic, but there's a lot that aren't, and have kind of like given up. And that was something that struck me at an early age. I was like, no. Like, I know that the systems are corrupt, things aren't changing, but it was like, how, if we don't step up and try to lead, how can you possibly expect things to be different, right? And I think that this panel and kind of the way you've been moderating it, I don't know, I hope that's an example that all of us give and that other people pick up, is like, we do need to lead, right? And take responsibility for things. Whether they were our problems or not to begin with, they are our problems. Like climate change, that's our problem. That's why I take that as our generation's problem. Did people before contribute to it? Yeah. Are we contributing to it? Yes. But like, we just have to take ownership.
Sorry, by the way.
Thank you. But we just have to take ownership and try to start directing the world in a better direction. I just turned 32, so now it's definitely like it's our problem, right? If we don't act in this decade, the next decade.
By 2050, we're going to have serious issues.
Absolutely.
And just 1% change.
Absolutely. So, I don't know. I think there's a large schisms between millennials out there, as there is in our politics as a whole, and our whole national politic of some people that are super optimistic and acting like this surge in entrepreneurship, and then a lot of separation and feelings of being powerless at the other side. So
lethargic. Yeah.
Exactly. So what I'm personally doing is trying to stand up. I always I like to be on panels like this to talk about the work that I have done without being too optimistic and futuristic about just what we want to do, because there's that, the future, we're going to change absolutely everything. And so trying to be grounded in reality, but still standing up and taking lead on important issues like climate change and encouraging others that we can do that and feel empowered.
Thank you. I think you well represented your generation. My generation, Gen X, was known as the me generation, the MTV generation. I want it now, give it to me now. So we were like considered the selfish generation. So if I could choose between aspirational versus selfish, I think you guys got the better reputation. But what else do you guys think?
Millennials consume information in flashes. Like if we look at social media that's trending, Snapchat stories, Instagram stories, we have the attention span of 15 seconds.
I'm sorry, what did you say? I forget.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. So yeah, if companies want to communicate a message to a younger generations, they need to use the same tools that the people are using and go through influencers and communicate informations in those short 15-second stories, as I mentioned. So yeah, I think that's the key in communicating. And also, I resonated a lot with what you mentioned about the age and not knowing what's actually happening in the industry. Because when I started a company, my dad was like, "Are you crazy? Starting a company in Russia, you're going to be in prison in like a year." I'm like, "No, I didn't know anything about it." And yes, he knew that there are certain things that could happen. And I think what's great about being young and not having any perspective on what you're doing, just seeing the problem and having the energy to solve it, this is what brings innovation. And just encouraging people to go out there and try things and not pay attention to others that have already failed, because maybe they are the ones who are going to succeed. I think that's the key.
Roxanne, add to that.
I didn't know people have problems with millennials. I think we're great.
So that's such a millennial perspective.
That was a joke.
Yeah.
I was reading about millennials' attitude towards healthcare, and everyone in healthcare preaches to put the patient in the center. And what does that really mean? I think it boils down to you have a hold of your health records, and you know what's going on with your records, and you can go to the doctor A, B, C. And show them and share with them and have them have an effective way to update your records. And all that it really fits with the attitude that millennials have towards healthcare, where we do Google things. I mean, there's a caveat there that you shouldn't trust everything on WebMD, but we don't always rely completely on the doctor. We do sometimes bring material into the doctor's office as well. So I do feel like that is it's almost the right generation to really push forward this new wave of patient-centric healthcare.
And that's a good thing and a bad thing too, right? It's like, are we going to have a generation of people that are all self-diagnosing? Is that a good thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, with all those things and with the short media, that as a way to consume, like if you're not consuming long form content, is that detrimental, right? And having unbridled optimism, that's wonderful until you literally fall. Then do you know how to get up, right? And so I think every upside has a downside, right? So it's like, how do we balance all those things? So I want to encourage folks to submit questions, and the method to do that, you can text it. Is there an email address as well? I forget. Just text. So, and I see some questions are coming in now. So I'm curious, my last question to the panel, and then we'll open it up for all of the smartest questions in the room, is what advice would you give to the many aspiring entrepreneurs? All of you are very successful and will only grow in your success. Please educate the room on your experience.
Don't wait to change. Pursue what you believe the change in the world should be. I think a lot of people sit and they say, I wish I could do this. I want to be an entrepreneur. But when you peel back the onion a little bit and ask about the problems in their current teams or what their company is working on, there's a lot of opportunities for people to lean in, step up in their careers, take on more responsibilities, and they're just not doing that. And they waste so much time spinning and looking for this perfect situation, and the grass is always greener. And I think sometimes you need to take the problem that's in front of you and just start taking action. And having that version 1 mentality to say, I'm going to try this experiment, see what the data tells me, and then move forward. And doing that in your whole life, whether it's purely on a startup basis and wanting to solve a big problem, or just in your work, in your day-to-day. And that could range from school all the way through. And I think more people just need to take action and take ownership of what they have in front of them. Because as I had started at the beginning, that we all have some finite amount of time, and we shouldn't waste our time on things that we're not passionate about. And I think a lot of us are looking for this perfect passion to fall in our laps. And I think it more comes from discovery and digging deep into a problem and taking ownership of what the opportunities we all have, being in such a great environment here. And we should really use that to our advantage to better.
That's very inspirational. So gung-ho, just jump in and get into it.
Yeah, stop talking about it, just do it.
Stop talking about it, get into it. I think that's great advice. Thank you.
I was watching.
Yeah.
I was researching a lot about IBM Watson, and they're doing some really cool stuff. Training on oncology trials over with Mayo Clinic for the past 3 years, and they're seeing some pretty good progress. And one of my favorite quotes from their CEO is, comfort and growth never come hand in hand. You just have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I think taking that step to exit the system is what I'm calling it. And since college and then being at a big company, you're always in this structure where if you suck up to this person or like say this right thing at the right time, in this meeting you might get a boost and you can kind of see your next steps. When you exit the system, you don't. It's all black. And you kind of feel like a naked person walking in the desert alone, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's tremendous amount of growth, and following and walking in that desert alone is when the passion, you're purely just driven by passion, and it's been the most empowering few months of my life. Yeah.
Awesome. Marina.
I would say go out there and try and build something without getting money, because a lot of people are just relying on raising cash, and they're like, oh, if I don't raise 100K, there is no way for me to start. But actually, there are so many tools using which you can start a business online, like, I don't know, Wix.com, Instapage, whatever. Just start a small Instagram or Facebook page and see if people are even interested in you solving the problem, whether they actually have it or it's maybe just you having this problem in your head, which is actually not out there. So yeah, just go ahead, try something, maybe get some first traction. It's going to be easy to raise money later. And maybe you will just start generating cash and you wouldn't even need to sell.
What does the panel think about crowdfunding? And is the ICO craze finally over? Is it? Is it dead now?
I think people are still in crypto.
Oh boy, okay. So any thoughts on crowd-based funding, whether it's ICO or Kickstarter, Indiegogo? Yay, nay, don't care?
Whatever it takes.
Whatever it takes.
I think they're fantastic, but you want to make sure it represents the real customer need. Because there were a lot in consumer hardware and industrial hardware got what looked like validation and wasn't their true market, right? But for my advice, I just want to echo what you said, Riley, that resonated with me really deeply. I think a lot of people in our generation are trying to have the whole experience, and so they can't ever find, this is my passion, and it's elusive. Like, what is your passion, right? And you get driven into this lifestyle of being a consultant of everything. Consultant is a great career path to take in of itself, but just like what can be the negative side of it is I need just a little experience of everything to feel happy, right? And you have these problems right in front of you that are so important to be solved. And other people are going to solve other problems, right? Healthcare is a great problem too. You're working on that, I'm not. That's okay, right? Climate change is a really important problem. So it's just stop where you are right now, reflect back on your life. And what has the problem that's been nagging me? What have I been involved with? What veins do I see? What rivers kind of flow through my history that bring to this point? And whatever it is, that's good enough. Just dive in and start working on it. And be patient, because it takes a long time. I've been in the arts journey for 3 years. The knowledge that made it possible extended back another 3, 4 beyond that, so 6, 7 years. And it's going to be hopefully 20 more years if we do it really well.
It's really interesting. The panel you've suggested to jump on in, and you guys are just go and do it, which is cool, and that's very Silicon Valley. But there's something to be said. I personally went out and got some business experience for a decade or so I could understand how business would work and the market and all those things. I just wasn't ready. Do you think that every person should just jump right in? Is that a safe thing to do?
Can I jump on that one
real
quick, and then I'll go?
Yeah, I would love to hear from everybody.
So there was a study 2-3 years ago about unicorn founders. Just one piece of data. Not everybody wants to be a unicorn founder, but the average age of the unicorn founder that started a consumer company was around 27. Huge distribution. Lots of yet way younger, like Zuckerberg, people in their 50s, 60s still starting a hit, right? But that was the middle of the distribution. For enterprise type companies, it was 52.
Yeah.
And that was because there's all kinds of problems that before you really understand, you're just not in the right place to solve it. But so you could say that, oh, I'm too old for consumer, I'm too young for enterprise. No. But I think the takeaway of that lesson is throughout your entire life, there are these windows that I like to call the observation space, where you went to a big company, you get to observe a problem and know it intimately, and there's that window of opportunity. So it's not at age 23, that's when you got to dive in right now or you missed it, but it's more at any given point, you're sitting in an observation space. You're at a special window of life where you see something that others don't see, if you'll sit back and think about it, and that window is going to leave. So maybe it's not special enough now, you wait. Wherever you are, you're 40 or 50 or 60s, now you've got this rich experience from the companies you've been a part of. What unique angle do you have now to jump in?
Very wise. That's very wise. Thank you. Let's get into some of the questions, unless anybody wanted to tag on that.
Yeah, my 2 cents here is just in our day and age, there's a lot of knowledge that's accessible to us on the web. I think I've gone through about 600, 700 hours worth of podcasts and YouTube. learning all angles that's necessary to create enough gravity in this idea, in this product. So in that sense, it's almost just getting yourself to go and sit down and just go through all that material. Because as you search on the web, there's so much information out there. And then add that into the real life experience that you can throw yourself in, wherever that may be. I think that's actually, that creates a lot of gravity.
Great. All right, we have quite a few questions, over a dozen, and I'm sure more will emerge. I mean, the smartest folks are always in the audience, collectively. So if we can get some precise, tight answers on this, and don't feel everybody needs to respond. Let's talk about education. We're here at, one of the most amazing schools on the West Coast. How has formal education helped or hurt your entrepreneurial careers? And if you do have a college background, what are the majors that are really great for entrepreneurship? I mean, please don't answer entrepreneurship, which is a focus in business, but anything related to that. Let's hear it.
I ended up getting the full rate scholarship for my MBA, but
Johns Hopkins, right?
Yeah,
Yep.
But the same month, we also got an offer from 500 startups, and I decided that I do not need my MBA because I'm going to get real life experience. That's number one. But number two, I would say mathematics is one of the greatest things that I've studied in my life, because it helped me just dig into the subject really deeply and then solve problems. I think that's one of the key educations you can get.
Wow, so you turned down the MBA full ride scholarship.
Yeah.
That's pretty significant.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I think engineering is a great undergrad. Especially in today, coding never hurts. Just knowing how to code. Even if you don't end up in a position to code yourself, it's highly beneficial to be able to talk to an engineer and talk about the tools and look at their terminal and kind of understand what's going on. So I think it's a pretty solid underlying layer.
No, that's good. My friend Lauren, raise your hand. She's a junior in high school and she's leading the coding, is it a group, academy, project?
Nice.
See, so we already have some budding engineers already picked up on that trend. Excellent. Let's talk about, so all of you are very young for now. Let's talk about managing people that are older than you. Do you have folks that are older than you in your team, and how do you manage that dynamic?
One of the first, the very first employee we brought on had 20 years experience in the semiconductor industry. Another semiconductor veteran, Talis here too, was at Stanford as well, but a little bit before me. We made it a point to bring in experienced people early on, because my co-founder and I were both younger. And it certainly is a challenge. I think we've been blessed with team members that give us a lot of respect. I always am kind of amazed at the end of the day sometimes, like, wow, I'm maybe 20 years, whatever it is, younger. And these people just really allow me to do my job and give me respect. So that's something special about this area that maybe wouldn't be true everywhere else in the world. They wouldn't give you the same regard. How do you manage, I don't know, kind of the same way you manage everybody. You give a ton of respect. You give people autonomy to lead their job. You brought them in the case of older people, to bring really in more wisdom and make sure that you take advantage of that. But at the same time, you don't pull away from your role. And in the beginning, David, who's our first employee, in the beginning, I didn't like to use the word CEO. I'm not the CEO. Okay, we're all equal. At one point, he was like, Andrew, do your job. You're the CEO. Like, I want you to put that title down so people aren't confused in contacting me. They should talk to you, And I was like, okay, got it. Balancing the giving a lot of respect, getting wisdom, but also doing your job. And I think if you do it well, you gain their respect. And people really benefit from having a wide diversity of age on a team. It's probably an underappreciated aspect of diversity.
And it's an actual issue here in Silicon Valley, and I hope VLab does, or you might have done a panel on that around ageism in technology and business.
Yeah.
Did you guys know you all get older? Anybody else want to add to that? Riley, I mean, you, 80 people in your company, I assume some of them are older than you.
Yes.
How are you managing that?
Having core values so our 3 main core values: integrity, trust, and empathy. And I am saddened by how many people have worked in companies that don't embody those 3 values. And the one thing that we committed to as co-founders is no matter what, we'll put those values first. And I think creating and asking people who have more experience to partner with us to take the experiences that they've had and shape our culture to an environment where people can exercise those values to the ends of the earth, I think is the biggest driver of why people who are more experienced joined Freenome early on, because they wanted to be in an environment that fostered and truly held accountable individuals to those values.
You can tell from the wisdom from these young CEOs, like they're going to go so far. They sound like seasoned CEOs and executives that I speak to that are 2 to 3 times their age. It's just really an honor to sit with you guys. Let's talk about your personal lives. First of all, do you guys even have one? What do you guys do outside of work? It can't be related to work.
Riley volunteered, said yes.
I have 3 younger siblings who are based on the East Coast. So we spend hours on the weekends Skyping with each other. We found that doing activities together, cooking together, watching a movie together, helping my brother get ready for prom was a huge ordeal.
All remote? All remote?
All remote,
Oh,
but
that's cool.
just doing something over video, that's an activity that we can do together. It just allows you to experience just the little things you would get that you might not get from a phone call.
That is awesome.
And just try to block hours of time on the weekends to be there with them.
That's really nice. What else? What are you guys doing?
I'm thinking if that's connected with work. But yeah, I'm vlogging a lot, but this is partly work. I also started teaching people on how to start in social media, so I'm doing those courses. If not connected to work at all, I like to walk around San Francisco. I'm still feeling really, really blessed to be here in this amazing place surrounded by entrepreneurs. So I try to talk to people as much as I can, walk around, meet people. I mean, that's an amazing place, and we're all blessed to be surrounded by each other.
So you're exploring the area.
Yeah.
Yeah. There is a question specifically about how did you get started on YouTube since we're on that channel?
So as I mentioned, I got this full-ride scholarship, and I realized there's not a lot of information about that online, especially in Russian. I started in Russian, and I just started talking about that experience, and it gained traction. I think YouTube is one of the best platforms to get organic traction, because I feel on Instagram or like Twitter, you need to promote yourself, like pay for ads. On YouTube, if you produce great content, if people keep returning for your content, YouTube is going to just help you get that organic viewership.
One of the risks with being on a platform that you don't control is that the algorithms can change and deplete your audience overnight. Do you have any concerns around that?
No, well, I didn't have any bad experience because I think YouTube loves educational content. That's what I felt in the last couple of years, so it just helped me gain more views. What I don't like is that many people see YouTube as a purely entertainment platform, and there's so much educational content that is not getting enough traction as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Roxanne, what are you doing outside of work?
I climb.
Indoor?
Yes. Oh, indoor if I can't go outdoor. It's I would love to go outdoor, but it's a dedication to get out into the real mountains and scale that. And these days you just don't have that type of investment. You can't spend that time.
Just a note for you. I recently got my life insurance policy, and that was one of the things that asked you, do you do, which would have negated my life insurance policy. Oh, yeah. Okay. So just be aware of that, and if you share it on social media, the life insurance company will probably see it. So just so you know.
All right, good to know.
Old guy wisdom, right? Andrew, what are you doing outside of work?
Not much, to be honest, but it's not a bad thing. So you do have to sacrifice a lot. I used to do a ton of things. I was a fencer. And I was a referee. I would go to the World Cups, and I had a rock band, released 4 albums. I was very serious about a lot of different hobbies, and I don't do that much of them. But what I do is I love the company we're building, and there's so many different aspects of it. And if you think about, I've talked about Arch, like our for-profit and our non-profit side. Like one of, like, my hobbies became the different aspects of the company. You can go too far with that to an unhealthy level, but part of that can be really good as well. If you're in a space where you love what you do so much that you're ready to commit that level of your time, and it's also life-giving back to you. If it was life-sucking, never would have worked, right? And I tried to do that in previous jobs. I tried to put 70, 80 hours in, and I was just done. But when I was working on this problem, that's something that I'm able to do consistently and feel good, and that obviously becomes an important part of success. So I feel fortunate to be able to do that right now. That doesn't mean I don't need downtime. I absolutely do need to crash.
It's important.
And I got married recently, so that's the rest of my time. So
That's good.
yeah.
Good. There's a couple questions here related to the rapid pace of technology change, and also what are some of the biggest changes in technology that you see. I was recently at CS. My friend Sandra, who's over here, she was there as well. And good Lord, there was I think, 6,000 or 4,000 exhibitors and 180,000 people showing up, and there is no way to see everything. And so my strategy is I wanted to see as many of the expo floors as I could in one single day. I did 25,000 steps to really see as much as I could, and I still couldn't see it all. So how do you guys keep up with all of these changes that are happening? And it's happening at a more rapid pace now, right? So how are you going to manage this?
You mentioned exhibition, but imagine just walking around San Francisco and you have a drawback. That works as a security guard. There's Amazon Go, like technology is actually there. And that's the thing.
And the self-driving cars and
self-driving cars, all of that.
Somebody's going to hit you on a scooter and you might trip over a scooter. And
yeah, it's no longer just CES.
And people are vaping
it's
on USB sticks now. So it's like,
yep.
One, on the computational research side, machine learning is, I think, absolutely incredible. There's a lot of great opportunities. We have a long way to go. But in using biological data or healthcare data, there's few data sets you can get access to. So we've been working on creating these data sets. We can give academic labs or other companies access to our data so that they can apply some of their methods. So trying to create a more open source environment around data sharing for biological data, which we believe will allow us to stay really connected to the machine learning community. The second big strategy is more on the assay development side for the wet lab. So we currently look at DNA, RNA, and protein from blood. There's always a new analyte that comes out every couple of years. There's been exosomes, microbiome. That's always we're gonna have these new discoveries. So how do you build infrastructure in the wet lab to enable to take a small company or an academic lab's analyte, integrate that into a high throughput facility, which will be sequencing 1 million people per year, and enable their technology to impact colorectal cancer, all these other use cases. In order to do that, you need to build some hardware innovations and also create a program that allows people to evaluate, and we can generate data for them to prove that their analyte improves a colorectal cancer test or any of the tests that we have. So it's really building process and infrastructure to help scale new innovations that come and preparing ourselves from a platform perspective to think about how these new analytes could disrupt what Freenome has.
And that gets more challenging, right,
integrators.
as you get bigger and bigger, right, and stuck into even certain business models.
I think if you don't plan with the end in mind and think extensively about what debt you're building to your organization without accepting the reality that we're always going to be making progress in biological discoveries, how do you have a system that evolves and keeps up with the pace of innovation?
The companies that Andreessen has invested in, many of them are platforms, right? So you can, I'm sure you have access to those entrepreneurs, and I'm sure they guide you in that way, perhaps?
Yes, I think everyone calls themselves a platform nowadays. But I think the true difference between a platform versus not is I think platform companies are willing to deprecate and throw away their core innovation from their first product.
Wow.
And I think if you ask that question to a founder, most people would never let go of their core technology. And I would call that a product-based company.
So you're willing to do that?
Yes. If for some reason in EHR data we figure out we can detect colorectal cancer and we never need to process a blood sample, then why would we ask people to take a diagnostic test? It's about solving the problem and having tools and a product that can solve these specific problems, but we don't care what the solution is. We're not wed to a specific technology to solve this problem.
Great. Anything else on the technology side, guys?
For us, it's a machine filter and a human filter. So early on, I built a list of over 1,000 IoT companies in a spreadsheet, made it, that was like a huge pain. And now we have more money, we can subscribe to some services that help do that, right? There's like Bloomberg for public companies, there's things that do it for private that can help you. But the human filter is really having a network that you stay in touch with that knows what you're working on, and investors, right? Big investor community that's capturing all those new technologies and companies coming out and helping filter it down to you. So I probably get 5 to 10 emails a week from investors or whoever, hey, we saw this new thing, and then they're helping feed, little short summaries, right? So that I can ingest information much more rapidly. Without that, it would be unmanageable for sure.
Got it. So out of the 4 of you, one of you is, you're still a public company. You're C Corp. C Corp?
We're not public yet.
I'm sorry.
But yeah, we're at Delaware C Corp.
You're still C Corp,
yeah.
but you have social roots.
Yeah.
And the stat I shared with you around income inequality, curious on that balance that you all have between, many of these are social-driven companies, even though you might be for profit, and certainly VC-funded venture capitalist, describes the business model and relationship. How do you balance that, the values and the virtues of serving society versus also capitalism? Is there room for both, or are they separate? What does the world look like as your generation becomes the dominant generation as the other ones move off? What will economies look like in 20 to 30 years?
Looks like a lot of the social impact being built into the price, no longer an externality. Right?
So CSR goes away.
Absolutely.
It should be built into the business model.
Corporate social responsibility is built into the price more and more, because people truly will pay for it. Like, imagine you're buying a water bottle in the grocery store, and like it had a label you could scan, and you pull up and you see if it was sourced sustainably, if it came from a clean place, or would our generation absolutely would scan that, and then they would be like, oh, this one's 30 cents more? No brainer, I'm buying that, right? And that wasn't always true, but technology helps make that possible as well. So I think that's one part of it.
Okay, so that's very different values, right, than some other generations that might be only buying by price. Okay, all right, I buy that.
I think other thing I'd add is opportunities given technology to help people, especially from healthcare, but if you live a healthier life, reducing premiums. And I think there's opportunities for people who are taking ownership of their health to save on cost of care, but it also will drive a lot of companies to prove out that whatever technology they have does improve some downstream benefit for people. I think that push and pull also will force companies to focus more on outcomes, but give people an opportunity to take ownership of their health and be compensated for that. And I think health insurance in particular can really
How would that work?
in that way.
People be compensated for that?
So if you maintain specific standards around a diet, your cardiovascular disease risk, et cetera, goes down. And if you have an algorithm that stratifies your risk based on diet, can you personalize pricing for premiums for those individuals? And I think now with the data that's accessible, given where payers are evolving to, given where Medicare has set some standards on certain high-cost drugs, there is an opportunity to take advantage and actually give some of that benefit back to people.
So diet is often, that's a complex topic because yes, it is behavioral, but it is also income-based, right? We see higher levels of obesity in areas of poverty, ironically, right? So, but then also there's the genetic disposition, which is highly debated, right? So should the 23andMe data determine insurance rates, right? So I can see how that could get into a sticky situation.
Do that.
That is illegal.
So,
yes.
But no, if people are willing to go on a diet program independent of their economic situation,
Yeah.
and payers are willing to finance that because they know it's going to reduce the overall cost of care, that's a win-win situation where people can benefit with the right tools and the right relationships with these groups. And frankly, health insurance companies aren't necessarily, they need to differentiate themselves, and if they offer programs like this that help people who might not have access to better nutritional information or even resources to get that information and also get capital to finance a better and healthier life. And I think we've gone to a place where we now understand these risk factors, that we could even offer that as a benefit to people. Or employers are another great place where you actually can leverage how employers are trying to differentiate themselves as a company, either not just their product, but their entire culture. And if they offer these as benefits to people who want to live and improve their quality of just health and life.
A lot of opportunities. Anything to add, Marina, Roxanne?
Yeah, I think marketing has become more socially responsible in general, especially in education. If before the ads were like, buy from us, now these ads would not work. And what we have to do to market our product is actually provide free educational content so that people would be able to see that we are experts in language learning. And if they want to do more, they would purchase the product. So I think this is also like the key to market in 2019 is to produce free educational content and educate your consumer for free first, and then ask him for money and prove that you're a real expert.
Great. So I think we're coming to a near close. So there's a number of questions here. It's interesting. One of them says, what piece of advice would you give to your 21-year-old self? And then somebody said, well, what advice would you give to your 12-year-old self? So why don't you do both? Let's hear that. Twelve-year-old self, what would you tell that person? What would you tell a high schooler? There is at least one high schooler here in the audience today.
Yeah, I think people in their younger ages tend to think more about what other people think of them and how they, I would say just don't care about it. It doesn't really matter. And like in 10 years, you're going to forget about those people. They will probably like, maybe if 2% of those people stay with you, then you're lucky. Like probably, I'm not in touch with any of my schoolmates, like maybe one girl, and that's it. And it doesn't matter what they think of you. Just do whatever you feel is right for you.
Yeah, I didn't have that lesson when I was in junior high, so that is true. It is true. Thank you.
On a very similar note on people, there's something very interesting about those friendships that you do form early on. Is once as you get older, the friendships also that friendship also ages with you. So there are those friends that you've kept in contact with for 15 years, and they're special by definition and by the fact that they've been around for 15 years with you. But I definitely agree. There's the more you care about how externally people view you, the more that holds you back. So I think it's being able to decipher, okay, this person's opinion or these people's opinion really, that does not define who I am. And being able to step away from that, I think, is the most empowering thing.
I mean, both of those things are very difficult in today's social media, social networked age where we're really geared upon those things, right? And for you CEOs, the press and media, right? One bad article could really screw up your night, right? So, great.
Yeah, and I think society tries to find some sort of a metric to evaluate you. It's in school. There's always this grade that you must be good because you have this number. And perhaps with startups, the amount that you raise, you raised this much, that means you must be this good. And I would just love to challenge that. That's just not accurate.
Good.
Tell my 12-year-old self mainly would be just have fun. Don't worry about your career at 12. But if I said one thing, I think it would be whatever you do, a class, a hobby, just do it really well. And that's like such a simple lesson, but when I think about the people that we want to hire at Arch, it comes across like night and day. Like somebody that just, the smallest thing that they did it really well.
You mean related to their job?
Related to anything. Like I could tell you, like if you push me, you said this person, give them like we have to assemble some sensors. The factory can't do it. All we're going to do is just hold them in the right place and click them down. Who's going to do a better job at that? And I just have a gut intuitive sense of I could depend on that person. They would hold it straight and they would click it down versus they would kind of do it, but they wouldn't do it as well.
What's your gut tell about me?
Putting me on the spot.
So obviously I wouldn't do a good job.
I think you do a few and then you try to figure out how to automate it.
Perhaps. Riley, give us some closing thoughts.
Well, I would say don't let the naysayers get you down, but actually you should listen to what the naysayers have to say, because I think too many people discredit their naysayers, say they don't know what they're talking about, or I'm just not going to listen to the negativity. But anytime someone gives you extreme optimistic or extreme pessimistic opinion, there's some truth. And I wish at 12 that I had appreciated that more, because I felt too often it's easy to just have people tell you, keep going, be courageous, be brave, but I actually think embracing the different opinions and just evaluating based on data information what's the best thing to do. I definitely wish I had a more balanced view at 12. 21, it translates into more, most people are not independent thinkers, and they make judgments off of very little information or a circle of like 3 to 5 people. And I think it's really dangerous to make decisions off of what people say, unless they have a track record of making decisions in that specific field or a track record of doing the thing you're asking them about. And I think we get so much advice and so much information, you cannot parse it through by just your gut feeling. And just being really smart and thoughtful and understanding that people will give you these different opinions, but to be an independent thinker, you have to understand where the information's coming from, and to synthesize that more effectively. And I think that a lot of the mistakes that we made were based off assumptions that we had heard from other people. And it wasn't until we brought in the right experts and the right people internally, and we as a team built enough trust and a foundational amount of relationships and camaraderie that we could have those honest, tough disagreements. We couldn't really get to the root cause of our problems and really build solutions until we had an environment that we could dig deep and understand where people were coming from. And I think in the early days of a company, you can really shape a lot of what you do off of just what you're hearing. And I think that can be really dangerous. And if you just accept and understand where people are getting their advice from and prioritize that based on a track record, I think it will make you much more successful.
Thank you. A lot of similar themes. Do you guys feel a little bit wiser from these young folks? I do. I think they're really inspiring group, and I learned a lot, and I will carry forth in my career many of the things you taught me. Please give a round of applause to this amazing panel.